All right. This morning in Sweden, the Secretary General spoke at the opening of the Stockholm+50 conference. He said that today global well-being is in jeopardy in large part because we have not kept our promises to the environment. As we have become more populous and more prosperous, our environment footprint has become unbearably heavy. The Secretary General added that we know what to do to address the crises that our planet faces, and increasingly we have the tools to do it, but we still lack the leadership and cooperation. The Secretary General appealed to leaders in all sectors to lead us out of this mess. He called on G20 governments to dismantle coal infrastructure with a full phase-out by 2030 in OECD countries and 2040 for all others. He also called on financial actors to abandon fossil fuel finance and invest in renewable energy. The Secretary General added that we must place the true value on the environment and go beyond the gross domestic product as a measure of human progress and well-being. Let us not forget that when we destroy forests, we're creating GDP. When we overfish, we are creating GDP. GDP is not a way to measure richness in the present situation in the world. On the sidelines, the Secretary General also had an audience with His Majesty Carl Gustaf, the King of Sweden, Her Royal Highness the Crown Princess Victoria, and he also had a conversation with 6 members of the Stockholm+50 Youth Task Force and a courtesy greeting with the Speaker of the Swedish Parliament, Andreas Norlén. And yesterday afternoon, the Secretary General also met with John Kerry, the U.S. Presidential Envoy on climate change. They discussed the implications of the ongoing geopolitical situation on global efforts to combat the climate crisis. The Secretary General emphasized that the war in Ukraine must be used as a moment to accelerate the transition away from fossil fuels and towards green energy and renewable energy. The Secretary General asked for Mr. Kerry's continued support in mobilizing private and public financial institutions around the goals of the Paris Agreement. They agree to continue to work together to ensure COP27 in Egypt demonstrates the urgency of responding to the climate crisis. Turning to Yemen, the Secretary General very much welcomes the positive news we heard on Yemen this morning. As you will have seen, Hans Grunberg, our special envoy for Yemen, announced today that the parties to the conflict have agreed to the UN's proposal to renew the current truce in Yemen for 2 additional months. The extension of the truce comes into effect when the current truce period expires, which is today at 7 p.m. Yemen time. The special envoy commended the parties for taking these steps and for agreeing to extend the truce. He said the truce represents a significant shift in the trajectory of the war and has been achieved through responsible and courageous decision-making by the parties. He added that we will continue to engage with the parties to implement and consolidate all elements of the truce in full and move towards a sustainable political settlement to the conflict that meets the legitimate aspirations and demands of Yemeni women, men, and children. This morning, back here, the Security Council held an open debate on strengthening accountability and justice for serious violations of international law. Briefing the council members was Michelle Bachelet, the High Commissioner for Human Rights. She did so via video. In her remarks, she noted that impunity fuels and intensifies many of the crises currently on the Council's agenda, adding that this emboldens perpetrators, silences victims, and undermines prospects for peace, human rights, and development. Her full remarks were shared with you. Also briefing was the President of the International Court of Justice, Joan Donoghue. An update for you from Mali following the attack yesterday that left 1 Jordanian peacekeeper dead and 3 Jordanian peacekeepers wounded. And this, as you will recall, took place when their logistics convoy was attacked near Kidal. I can tell you that the 3 are currently receiving medical care in Bamako in a peacekeeping hospital. We, of course, wish them a speedy recovery. And you will have seen that yesterday in a statement we issued, the Secretary General condemned the attack and called on the Malian authorities to spare no efforts in identifying the perpetrators so they can be brought to justice swiftly. He also reaffirmed the United Nations' determination to support the people of Mali in their quest for peace and security. Humanitarian update for you from Chad, where the government has issued a decree yesterday declaring a food and nutrition emergency. I want to give you a bit of a grim picture. At least 2.1 million people are expected to be severely food insecure during the lean season in Chad, which begins now and will continue through September. Around 1.8 million children under the age of 5 are expected to suffer from acute malnutrition, especially in the capital N'Djamena, where cases of severe acute malnutrition increased by 121% in the past 3 months. That's according to UNICEF and government estimates. The crisis is driven by a combination of insecurity, deep poverty, erratic rainfall, record high food prices, and a deterioration in the economic situation. In the last month, in anticipation of the lean season and considering the low level of humanitarian funding, our appeal for Chad is only 15% funded. $8 million was allocated from the UN Central Emergency Response Fund. This will help humanitarians provide food and nutritional assistance in the most affected provinces and nutrition services to children and women in N'Djamena. Also in Chad, our humanitarian colleagues are telling us that clashes have been reported since last week between groups illegally controlling gold mines in Kuri Bugudi. This is in the Tibesti province in the north of the country. According to International Organization for Migration, some 10,000 people in the area need water, food, and non-food items, protection, as well as safe relocation. According to the Office of Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, there's currently no humanitarian presence in Tibesti, and access is limited. Coordination between the humanitarian community and the government is ongoing to respond to the needs of the population there. And in South Sudan, the Secretary General Special Representative Nicholas Fink-Haysom spoke at a meeting in Juba earlier today at the implementation of the revitalized peace agreement in the country. Mr. Haysom noted some positive developments, such as the swearing in of all state assemblies and progress made on a truth, reconciliation, and healing commission. He did, however, express his concern over what he called the alarming scale of subnational violence, particularly in the states of Eastern Equatoria, Unity, Warrap, and Jonglei. Mr. Haysom said this violence continues to sow division amongst communities and unleash suffering on innocent women, men, and children, including through sexual and gender-based violence. The UN peacekeeping mission continues to try to protect civilians in these areas, he said. With the end of the current transitional period fast approaching, Mr. Haysom urged the government of South Sudan and the parties to urgently pass key legislative bills that are necessary to galvanize the permanent constitution-making process and ensure that a free, fair, and peaceful election can be held on time. Some positive humanitarian news from Madagascar, where humanitarian colleagues tell us that food and nutrition security has improved in the Grand Sud region. This is an area we've been talking to you about, which has been severely hit by hunger and climate crises. The improved situation follows the large-scale mobilization of humanitarian assistance in 2021 and this year, and we've been responding to the worst drought in more than 40 years in Madagascar. Since January of last year, we, along with our humanitarian partners, have reached 1.1 million people in drought-impacted people in the Grand Sud with critical assistance, which has played a vital role in the risk of famine. This has been possible due to the generosity of our donors, who contributed $196 million to the $231 million required for the Grand Sud drought response between January of last year and May of this year. However, humanitarian colleagues warn that the situation there remains fragile, with 7 out of 10 districts in Grand Sud still in crisis, food insecurity phase, and global acute malnutrition and emergency levels in many places. It's imperative that the response continues and continues to be funded in the months ahead. At the same time, in recent months, food insecurity has unfortunately risen in the southeast of Madagascar in the aftermath of tropical cyclones Batissarai and Emnati in February of this year. From April to August 2022, 5 out of the 6 districts in the southeast will be in crisis phase, and about 67,000 people will face food insecurity. This is the first time these high levels have been projected in this region of Madagascar, which is ordinarily a crop-producing area. Voila. Edward, and then we'll go to Edie.
Hi, Steph. Several questions. First, on the truce of Yemen. First, today, there's an extension of the 2 months truce. And for last 2 months, there's a significant drop of death and injuries of civilians, and also there's commercial flights. What would be the next target? For example, would UN to push the relative parties to open the main roads lead to the third biggest city, Taiz? Because that's many people demanding.
Yes, that would definitely be a goal. I mean, I think, you know, we've been dealing with the conflict in Yemen for a long time. So I think we need to continue to show determination in adding to the building blocks that we're able to create with the parties. We had a 2 months truce. We're going through another 2 months truce. That's all positive momentum. It is good news for the people of Yemen who have suffered so much in this man-made crisis. Mr. Grunberg will now continue his efforts to really solidify the gains that we've already seen.
My second question is concerning Iran. It's been reported yesterday that U.S., Britain, Germany, and France pushed IAEA to pass a draft resolution to condemn Iran on some the uranium traces on some undeclared sites. And it's been reported that some people they worried it would sabotage the JCPOA resumption negotiation process. I just want to know what would the Secretary General's view on this issue.
Look, let's separate a couple of things.
Yeah.
The push by member states within the IAEA to pass a resolution or a statement, whatever, that's a member state issue. That's not for us to comment. The Secretary General has always called for Iran to live up to its IAEA commitments in answering questions that the IAEA submitted, and he's expressed his concern about Iran continues to enrich uranium as described in the latest IAEA report.
But you know, Iranian they replied, we will naturally respond in a strong and appropriate manner to any unconstructive action by the board of IAEA.
Let's leave that to member states.
Okay.
Edie.
Thank you, Steph. You said you were going to look into any follow-up on the Safer tanker. Is there a follow-up on that?
No, there's nothing new to report on that.
Okay, a couple of other things. On the attack in Mali, were any of the attackers injured or killed?
Not that I have seen.
Okay.
Okay.
And thirdly, you talked about the appeal for Chad being 15% funded. How big was the appeal?
You know, that's the question I was asking myself as I was reading the note with nothing to compare it to. So, as always, Majid.
Thank you, Stéphane. My question is on Syria. Turkey announced that they will launch a military campaign into 2 major Kurdish cities, in order to cleanse those 2 cities. And I quote the president of Turkey. Any reaction from the Secretary General to this new development?
Well, I mean, I think we would urge all the parties to exercise maximum restraint. There's been A ceasefire agreed in northern Syria since really October 2019 and then 2020 between various parties. We are very attached to the importance of that ceasefire, and we hope it's maintained.
Just follow up on that. You said all parties, but there's one party announcing a military operation, which is Turkey.
I mean, we, you know, I think our critical message is for all countries involved to respect the territorial integrity of Syria. Ms. Saloume.
Thanks, Steph. Just following up on Yemen, positive step forward. Some Yemenis are understandably still concerned and a little skeptical and worried going forward. I'm wondering if you think this step is enough to maybe reassure them, or more importantly, international donors. Do you think it will be enough to have an impact on fundraising efforts, and do you see the two connected in any way?
How different people interpret this is up to them. I mean, it is, if you ask me, is this a positive step or a negative step? It clearly is a positive step. I think one can understand the skepticism of the people of Yemen, given what they've endured. It is the responsibility of the parties to ensure that this truce holds. We encourage them to work actively with Mr. Grunberg in his efforts to find a sustainable political solution. And I think the longer we can create and keep and uphold a kind of a truce bubble, the more we hope that donors will continue to fund our operations. And also, as important, this truce allows humanitarians greater access to people they may not have otherwise been able to reach.
Thank you, Stéphane. Tunisian president has fired 57 judges over claims of corruption and protecting terrorists. The step rejected and condemned by the Judges Association and some in the Tunisian opposition. Any comment on that?
I think, you know, we've always, we are concerned about the developments in Tunisia, which we continue to follow very closely. Okay. Paulina. Oh, sorry, Edward.
Yeah, actually, I have the third question.
That's a fourth.
I don't
Fourth.
know whether you have already mentioned this or not. If you mentioned this, just forgive me. You know, a couple of days ago, there's a big flooding in North Brazil that already had a death toll over 100 people and 14 still missing. Any response from the Secretary General on this?
I will check with our humanitarian colleagues. I'm not aware that we've been asked to assist. We, of course, you know, our team in Brazil stands, and our humanitarian colleagues stand ready to assist in any way. And we extend our condolences to the people and government of Brazil for this, for these horrendous floods. I mean, I've seen the video; they're heartbreaking. Yeah. Alan, speaking of heartbreaking.
Thank you, Stéphane. Appreciate. I have a question. Some media referring to sources in Turkey report that the meeting between Ukraine, Russia, UN, and Turkey is going to be held in coming days. It's kind of a technical meeting, as far as I understand, and it would it will be about the issue of the grain, Ukrainian grain transportation via Black Sea. Do you have any details, any dates, who will participate in this meeting, where will it be held? Thank you.
No, nothing more to share with you at this point. There's, as you know, lots of activities going on. Mr. Griffiths is in Moscow today and tomorrow, where he's meeting a number of officials from the Russian government. Ms. Greenspan was also in Russia. She's then went to Washington. we've seen a lot of positive statements coming from various capitals. We also very much appreciate the role that Turkey is playing in all of this. Once we have something concrete to announce, we will do so. Okay. You may follow up.
Thanks, Steph. We know that the Russian foreign minister will be in Turkey on the 8th of June. I'm just wondering if any UN people will be there as well.
I have nothing to share with you now because no one's shared anything with me as of now. But listen, the situation remains fluid. The Secretary General, the two main people he's tasked to work on this, Rebecca Greenspan, Martin Griffiths, we will do and go anywhere we need to go to push this project forward.
Has the UN been invited, since it is very much involved?
I have really nothing else to share with you at this point. Okay, Paulina, please.